honestly, my way of doing things as a result of that time was hugely influenced by both the successes and the failures of being in that crucible. And there's a certain hardness to it. There's a certain speed and edge to it. And there's certainly a great deal of hope in it and optimism. And all of those things honestly resonate with the raw material that was me at the time. And, I think it helped definitely form the kind of founder and CEO that I am, for sure.
Welcome to the Startup CEO Show. I'm your host, Mark McLeod. In this episode, I sit down with prolific founder and CEO Mike Serbinis, who is currently co-founder and CEO of League. Mike has over 1 billion of exits under his belt. In this episode, we explore his journey from engineer to winning what he calls the Nerd Olympics, becoming CTO, and then eventually CEO of his various businesses. We talk about competing against Amazon, and he's now 10 years into his journey with League and a really important mission in the healthcare space, and he has over 20 million users on his platform. This conversation could have been at least twice as long. So many great stories here and so many great lessons for CEOs. I really hope you enjoy the episode. Mike, welcome to the Startup CEO Show. It's a true pleasure to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Mark. Great to be with you. And today's a good day. It's hump day. We almost through the week, and I've got some exciting stuff lined up. So happy to be here.
So I wanted to have you on the podcast for some time. There's no official stats on this, but I feel like you're one of the more prolific tech founders, over 1 billion of exits under your belt in completely different industries, which means it can't just be luck. And now, of course, League, which we're going to spend a bunch of time on, just had its 10th anniversary. And I was reading some of your retrospective posts on the 10th anniversary and your reflection, and something you wrote in the year one post maybe reinforced sort of why I wanted to have you on the show, which was just the expectation that everyone investing was just like, oh, this is going to be easy money. Mike knows what he's doing. Like, this is going to be an easy win. Let's just start there and like how you dealt with that, other than maybe, you chose a super challenging industry, so people had reality beat into them. How did you handle the fact that everyone just assumed this is going to be easy because Mike's done it twice already?
Yeah, I mean, I love what I do, and I've been doing it for a couple decades plus now. And, the idea of taking on a new problem and coming up with a way, a system, a product, a technology, a kind of value proposition to go about and solving it, for me is really exciting. And, I learned that early days in Bay Area from some now infamous people. But I thought, okay, I have done this a few times. I seem to have a way of, being successful, and, there's culture and team and all sorts of stuff to unpack there. Healthcare just feels like such a giant opportunity filled with lagging experiences for people, patients, consumers, health insurance customers, and this has gotta be not only a huge opportunity, it's gotta be pretty easy. And I literally said that to my co-founding team.
Famous last words.
Oh God, honestly, they will never let me forget that I said that. They were like, all right, we're going to do this again. It was a war last time, going up against Amazon, and it's global, and yeah, but like, is it going to be a war again? Like, I don't know if I have that in me. And I was like, look, we can do this. This is going to be easy. We'll be in, I might have even said, we'll be out in like a few years. And obviously that has not been the case. And it has been both a much bigger opportunity than we ever could have conceived at the time. It's also been much harder than any other company I've built, and any other CEO gig or founder gig that I've ever had.
Wow, that's saying something. I have to assume Kobo was difficult, competing against Amazon sounds non-trivial. So that, as a relative statement, your statement is a big one.
Yeah, that's a business, and we had this kind of early insight that, okay, they have more money, more brand, and more customers than almost any other technology company that serves consumers in a way, in any way. And so, if anything that we come up with that is core to our way, our strategy, our approach to winning in this market, we come up with any way, any set of tactics or strategies that with more money could beat us, with more customers could beat us, or with more kind of brand awareness could beat us. We can't do it because that's what they'll do and they will beat us. So it's actually a pretty hard problem to solve. And yet, with an understanding of the problem from first principles, we did, David did what Goliath couldn't do. We kind of used a lot of that story and the metaphor there in our strategy, and it was hard, but we were able to succeed.
Let's take a step back. There's many folks listening or watching who, like you, either are engineers or once were engineers. And maybe just if you go in the Wayback Machine, at one point you were an engineer and then you became a CTO and now you're a CEO. Like, how did you transform yourself? Particularly, I guess, in the business side. I understand the technical foundation, but other than just putting in the reps in and screwing up, how did you develop mastery over these, I guess, non-technical aspects in order to become, a CEO?
Yeah, you're right. I started as an engineer, worked on building a local search engine, and then, as a CTO, building one of the first cloud storage companies. And I guess that was my first co-founder gig. And both of those examples, I had some interesting people to observe. One of them was Elon Musk, and the other,
I've heard of him.
Yeah, you've heard of him. And the other was my co-founder Evan Krapko at DocSpace. And so there was definitely learnings from both of them. And early days, you're wearing many hats, and any startup, and certainly anyone that succeeds, you just kind of keep wearing different hats. And when we sold DocSpace, we were acquired by a company called Critical Path. That was a NASDAQ darling, front page of every paper, and cover of Forbes and Fortune, and all the industry standard, the magazines that mattered at the time.
Industry standard. I remember that used to be like this thick.
Yeah. And then it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I had some good examples, and all of a sudden I'm part of this experience at Critical Path, and we were still flying. 7 days later, post the acquisition closing, the NASDAQ peaked, the bubble burst, and the market began to tank. However, our stock went up 6 times, a multiple of 6, in the next 6 months. So by summer, NASDAQ was off. I can't remember the exact numbers, but NASDAQ was fell off a cliff. And we were up 6x. Like, the deal we did was at $19 a share. And by summer, I think we were at 120. And then the wheels started to fall off the bus. Enron happened. We misstated earnings in one of our quarters that year. But to give you a sense, this was 1 to 2% of revenue kind of misstatement. We caught it. Fortunately, we caught it only a few days after earnings, and but the market did not like it. We started tanking. We had an SEC investigation. We put these executives on leave. All of a sudden, we were looking at revenue being a real problem. Sales dried up. Customers were pulling away. We had to cut significantly, about 1,000 people. It's 77 offices that we went down to initially 20 offices. So I went to a lot of those offices, and a FedEx box would meet me there, and literally would hand out packages. And 9/11 happened that year, and in that sort of post-tragedy aftermath, the FBI was doing their work, and we ran hundreds of millions of email accounts. So guess what? We cooperated with the FBI, and so between FBI and like NASDAQ and delisting and SEC and like refactoring the company, like that experience beyond the learning how to build and write some code, build a product versus just some code, and learning how to build, a company in my first experience doing that as CTO, but co-founder. All of a sudden I was faced with like any one of those things could have been like a big life experience over a decade or over a career. I had them all in about a 2 to 3 year period, and then had to figure out how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again and come out of it. And so I had some great examples in those years of great sales leaders, of great finance leaders, of decision making in crisis, rebirth, and a phoenix kind of arising from the ashes, and kind of made it through to the other side. And we exited that company to General Atlantic. And so I look at that experience and I'd say, beyond the foundational things of, obviously knowing how to build technology and sell technology, I learned all of the other bits, or a lot of the other bits, through that experience. And at that point, I was kind of itching to start something new and only be the CEO.
Good for you. I got to tell you, some people might go through that and just crawl under a rock or be like, you know what, I'm going to be a computer science professor. Screw this operating bullshit. So I love that you had the opposite reaction. I operated for a long time in startups, but the reason why I never started a company is I deeply believed that to start a startup, you should be technical or be a product person. I always joke, like, accountants don't start law firms. Now, you are deeply technical. In retrospect, how important has that been to your success as a CEO?
Yeah. In fact, today I had breakfast with the dean of engineering at my alma mater, and I talked about this with him, and actually later in the morning, I did a Zoom with one of my daughter's friends who's an engineer at the same school, and I shared with her and with him the same thing, that I studied engineering physics. I had a kind of a unique experience and high school experience doing some work for NASA, Jet Propulsion Lab. So I was highly...
So you're literally a rocket scientist.
Yeah, I'm highly technical. I mean,
Yep.
one of the other hats I wear today is chair of the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. So like, I was very technical, and but more important than that, I guess in the crucible, and most of my friends, were in engineering. Not all of them were in engineering physics. We were doing 40 to 50 hours of class a week, and the work on top of that. One term I had, I think, 10 courses and 2 labs. All my other friends were doing about half of that. But you learn how to handle the pressure of being in the crucible, and you learn how to, under that pressure, solve really any kind of problem. And you kind of, after a while, there's a bit of pattern recognition, there's a bit of ego or confidence, at least, that you can solve any kind of problem. And so that foundation for me, and really this idea of a beginner's mind, I can solve anything from first principles, or at least can take a crack at it. And maybe with some of my sports, love and athletics from growing up, I played a lot of team sports. Knowing and believing that you can solve a problem from first principles, plus the idea that it takes a team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that really has been my formula. And of course, it still helps to be technical, but it's more specifically the know-how of solving hard problems.
I love reading about your reference to the Nerd Olympics.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to describe the International Science and Engineering Fair. Uh, it's hard to really gather what it is unless you've been there, unless you understood that the National Science Foundation in the U.S., in conjunction with Defense Intelligence of the Pentagon, decided to put on this event to really capture the attention and get some of the most talented kids from around the world. I think the years that I did it, it was probably 500 or 600 kids a year. 200 to 300 were from the U.S. and the rest were from everywhere else. I think Canada got to send 2 a year, and so yeah, and then you go. By the way, you go there, and it's not like you're seeing any volcanoes. You're seeing leveraging the technology and the methodology for flight from a Dragonfly applied to a next generation variant of the F-22 with full military funding, and a kid that, unlike me, a kid that went to like a charter school focused on engineering. That's what it was. And the money and the people there, money was incredible. The year that I won, I was a student from, Steeltown in Canada, and it was tens of thousands of dollars. It was a scholarship from Boeing and Rockwell to go anywhere I wanted on their dime. It was computers for my school and, sponsorship by Intel for the city and the school board that I went to school in.
A lot of pressure riding on your shoulders.
Yeah. It was incredible. And, so yeah, I affectionately refer to it as the Nerd Olympics, global, some of the smartest kids around, and, just a real incredible community around it. So that for me was pretty formative.
You talked about meeting Andy Grove pretty early on. And for the young folks listening, Andy Grove was a legendary CEO of Intel. And I always ask my CEOs what books they read or have read that influenced them. And literally every one of them has read High Output Management. And I'm just wondering, was that an influential text for you? And how did Andy influence you as a leader?
I knew about Andy before I was surprised that day when I won the gold medal, before I won the Nerd Olympics. And all of a sudden he's on stage and I'm both in awe and then also observing, wow, he's quite a bit shorter than I thought he was. I'm like 6'1", 6'2" almost, and he was a much smaller guy but tough looking. He's Hungarian. I know, some of my best friends and actually family are in Hungary, and they're tough people. And Andy was an immigrant to the U.S. He was really core to the birth of the semiconductor industry, not only Intel. And so I see him on stage. I'm like, okay, he's shorter than I thought. And then just the energy around him. I've met a few people in my life that I thought literally were glowing. And Andy had that. He had that sort of charm, the energy, he was a million volts, a handshake, all of it. And with a warmth of the gooey center of a lava cake. He's just such a warm guy.
It's very descriptive.
And he, and I eventually I would have read, cause I would not have looked for High Output Management at the time, being a super physics nerd. But Only the Paranoid Survive is the one that really, really stuck with me. And honestly, it's a blessing and a curse that I feel that way all the time. It's a key to why my companies have grown and been hyper growth companies and have ultimately been successful. It's also, at times what keeps me up at night, because I'm always thinking, I'm climbing the hill. I'm not quite on the mountain. There must be a different way or another way, or someone's coming. Something is coming that I should be thinking about and getting ahead of. So that was definitely one of the gifts from Andy.
In retrospect, there's a decent number of Canadian listeners here. In retrospect, how important was it for you to have early experience at Silicon Valley?
Pretty critical, no question. One of my friends that's is Canadian, who's an investor, probably will listen to this at some point. Made it to Silicon Valley around the same time as me. He's a bit older than me, but started a company in that same era, kind of late 90s, and came back to Canada for a bit before going. He had a pretty significant role at Facebook, was an investor in one of the sort of storied firms. Anyways, he describes it, and we're both football fans. He's like, it's hard to get excited about the CFL when you're busy playing in the NFL, and you're in it. You're in, you've heard other metaphors like the big leagues. Like there's just something different about it. The level of competition, the level of urgency, and Silicon Valley has now a pretty incredible brand. There's not many parts of the globe where people would not know what Silicon Valley is. It's synonymous with, innovation and technology and just incredible competitiveness and, resiliency and speed. And in my time, at least, I've got to see like creative destruction over and over and over again, and companies coming out of nowhere and being an example of stratospheric growth faster than anything else has ever grown. And it just kind of keeps happening. It's in the, it's in the water, it's in the culture. And for me, it was all of that. I saw my own eyes, just kind of how it worked. I joke to some friends of mine, or whenever I talk to, students or young entrepreneurs, I'm like, for me, it's when I discovered that you could do a job that you love to create something out of nothing. And people will give you money for that. And if somehow you completely screw it up, in most cases, you don't have to give the money back and you're not going to jail. It's like, I never got that memo in high school. Like I was unaware, going to a public high school in Hamilton, Ontario. My parents were immigrants to Canada. They worked in factories, and eventually my dad had a business. But like I must have missed the memo of being a tech entrepreneur. And honestly, it was a gift to land down there and to have that experience, even though like my initial experience, I would say did not stay long. Cause in part I thought I could do this myself, and own, 50% or 30%.
Is that why you came back to Canada?
Well, initially I came back because I had a girlfriend.
That's a great lead.
And, but it didn't take long to go back. So it was honestly, it was a short stint. And then DocSpace was officially a Delaware company, headquartered in Menlo Park. And, we built that company as if we, had always been in Silicon Valley, and operated at a very high level of urgency and competitive drive. And with an idea, which honestly, I would not have been good at articulating it back then, but I kind of think of every one of these opportunities having something in common with the Olympics. It's always a global competition. It comes around every so often, right? Obviously, Olympics would be 4 years, and new sectors, new categories are on probably a bit of a longer cycle, maybe aligned to the business cycle. And there's always three people on the podium, gold, silver, bronze. But I challenge you, I don't think anyone has ever remembered, a bronze medalist. And certainly in business, I can name the number one smartphone company in the world. I couldn't name number three. Laptop, keyboard, garage door opener, like whatever you want. It just doesn't exist. People soon forget it's Coke and Pepsi and nothing else really matters. And so, yeah, that pattern I got to see over and over again. But the first time I really got to see it was in Silicon Valley. And I guess the realization was, if you are going to spend the energy and the time and endure the crucible of it, why do it for eighth place? Figure out what first place looks like, and do everything in your power and your team's power to get there.
That's huge. And I want to bring that, I want to pick up on that. But one last question about Silicon Valley. Geography matters a little less now than it did then, that Silicon Valley remains special and unique. What's your advice to early stage founders today in terms of leveraging that?
I think you have to be connected to it. I don't know that you can be totally appreciative of it and the dynamics of it. And I use that word on purpose, like the movement of it, unless you're really in it. And it's possible, I think, to accomplish a certain level of that, not being there and going regularly. But I think if this is what you love and this is what you want to do, I think you have to have a stronger taste of it. Be there for a bit, be there for, a good time. I mean, ultimately I was there, with some on and off, but over about a 10-year period.
Oh, that's a long stretch.
Honestly, my way of doing things as a result of that time was hugely influenced by both the successes and the failures of being in that crucible. And there's a certain hardness to it. There's a certain speed and edge to it. And there's certainly a great deal of hope in it, and optimism, and all of those things honestly resonate with at least the raw material that was me at the time. And I think it helped definitely form the kind of founder and CEO that I am, for sure.
This episode is brought to you by Fellow. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You wake up, you take a look at your calendar, and you see it's filled with meetings, stand-ups, weekly check-ins, one-on-ones, town halls, and those are just your internal meetings. Some are productive, but some are definitely slowing you down. Be honest with yourself. How many times have you thought this meeting could totally have been an email? Now consider that in the US alone, there are 55 million meetings each day, and 85 to 90% of those don't have an agenda. Fellow is on a mission to solve the meeting problem by offering the only AI meeting management solution that covers every part of your organization's meeting workflow. And as a Startup CEO Show listener, you get 300 free minutes of AI recordings if you sign up today. Go to fellow.app/CEO to start your free trial and start having better meetings.
So going for gold, I could have done the research beforehand to figure out whether Kindle was in market before you launched Kobo. I feel like it was. So did you feel like gold was in sight for you? Tell me about your mindset deciding to compete against a large line of business for Amazon.
Yeah, the timing in my life is also an important part of the story. I had moved back to Canada. I met my wife, my now wife, and we tried living in San Francisco, tried living in New York, and did a spreadsheet. And kids and family were important, so we decided Toronto kept winning in the spreadsheet, no matter how we changed the weightings. And honestly, for a while, I thought I was going to do nothing and be a stay-at-home dad, because in my last company at Critical Path, I was traveling every week, internationally, long haul. It was intense, and I just wanted to change. I got to meet Heather Eastman of Indigo. We had a great chat about what happens when books go digital. Heather built great business, innovative, approach to honestly selling books. And fast forward a few years, most of the biggest booksellers in the world were my partners at Kobo. And I would say then that she stood out head and shoulders above pretty much everybody I met as a real innovator, frankly, an entrepreneur at heart, a true entrepreneur. So anyways, back to that. So we got going, and the premise was books were going digital. It's a massive market. It would happen globally. It would follow a pattern, probably faster, but similar to music and video, TV, other content forms that already had started to go digital. And that would harm the existing book business. But it would probably not go as fast because the content form, there was some variety to it that would slow down certain parts of it, would speed up other parts of it. And so we felt there could be a pure play. And where Amazon Kindle was already out, they were absolutely closed play, and they were going to ride on Amazon rails. We could build an open play, connect with libraries, connect with the open format that had been really got some traction at the time, which was EPUB, which is essentially an XML based format. And we could help the empire strike back. We can help the existing bookstore leaders around the world with an Andy Grove reference, Intel inside. Kobo could be inside, and that model would beat Amazon in most countries. In most countries, online sales of books were nowhere, with the exception of the US and to a lesser degree the UK. Everywhere else, online sales were like sub 7%, 6%. So where did the best book buyers go? They went to the physical bookstore that was the leader. They were card-carrying loyalty members. And so we thought we can be a pure play. The tech platform, content and devices and apps and the global infrastructure underpinning it all. And we could go around the world and whisper in the ear of the CEOs of those bookseller companies, Amazon is coming, and they're gonna hurt your business. And but with us, you will deliver a competitive offering that your customers will love, and you get to hold on to those customers. And more importantly, the data around what those customers are doing will help you cross the chasm and transition to the other side and decide which categories of books don't need space in stores anymore, like computer books. I remember going to Barnes & Noble in Redmond when I was at Microsoft during college, or Chapters and Indigo in Canada to buy computer books like how to do whatever in Java or XML. Nobody does that anymore. And we could see that early in the data. And so that was also part of the value prop. Anyhow, we had a different approach. And back to my test, if Amazon could outspend us on whatever the strategy was, it wasn't going to work. If they could outbrand us, it was not going to work. If they could out-customer us, it wasn't going to work. So this approach, competing with Amazon, showing up typically later than us in an international market. So we had first mover advantage, even though we did not come up with the Kobo first device before Kindle. It was probably a year plus later. We caught up quickly on the hardware, which was surprising because we didn't know anything about making hardware. And there's a great story there about Mike Lazaridis, the co-founder of BlackBerry, or Research in Motion, and how he helped us, how he helped me in particular. But we all of a sudden were winning the, Wired and Wall Street Journal, Walt Mossberg kind of device, consumer reports, you name it. We were winning on best device. Took us a while, but we caught up on content really fast. But internationally, we were first mover, and we were with the customer, or the partner rather, that the best loyalty card holding book buyers, not just readers also go to the library, don't actually buy as much, but book buyers went to. And all of a sudden, I had $0 customer acquisition, and I was impervious to Amazon coming in usually early November, and dominating the airwaves and plastering Kindle ads everywhere, didn't matter because I had a built-in captive customer base in these companies that became my partners. And I had distribution already locked up. That was actually highly targeted distribution. And I had great deals with these companies. And so I had a strategy that was essentially not defeatable by the Amazon model of selling Kindle, a closed experience only on the Amazon website, and paying for those customers with mostly over the air, TV ads, magazines, and bus stops. Really expensive. They would spend $100 million just to get started in the market in advertising. We spent zero.
On the content side, is it a land grab? Is it like each of you is trying to get the J.K. Rowling novel first, or can she license to both of you?
In the beginning, the publishers were very wary of giving any sort of unique access to Amazon. So they kept their options open. It actually helped when Google got in the market, even though they never were significant market share player. And it even helped when Apple got in the market, although Apple, ended up getting caught in a Department of Justice, lawsuit, essentially with the publishers on price fixing. But it helped because all of a sudden, it wasn't just us, the pure play. There was other people that wanted the books digitally as well. And so publishers had to level up their ability to distribute evenly and at the same time to all of us. And something that actually Amazon started doing first, and we were a fast follower on this. The others didn't really follow, Apple and Google, is self-publishing. So we became a publisher. And honestly, in the beginning, we did it because people were calling our customer service lines and having these really long calls with our CS agents on how to get their books on Kobo. And so we did a self-publishing portal, self-publishing program, really just to reduce customer care costs. And here's a stat for you. At the time, any one publisher was 9 to 10% of the market in a particular country. Self-publishing grew to be about 35%. So we were the biggest publishers in a market before long. And some of these books are books that, only the author and their mom or dad would ever buy. So there's a long tail of those. But some of them became, like 50 Shades of Grey or other examples that really broke out. And the really big books like J.K. Rowling, they had really special treatment. And to get those books, we needed to play by their, let's say, special rules. J.K. Rowling actually was the digital distributor of her books. So we had to have this special connection with this entity that was wholly owned by J.K. Rowling. And of course, she partnered with publishers on it too, but it was unique. So eventually content was a level playing field, but it took a while. It took at least probably a couple of years to get up to that standard. I mean, Amazon had just built an infrastructure of people in country that worked with publishers like a sales team effectively that we needed to create a version of it. And it took a couple of years to get the countries that mattered.
So you have this, largely, to use your word, undefeatable business, large, fragmented, evergreen, international market. Theoretically, you could go for a long time. Talk me through the decision to sell.
Yeah. So when we started, like week one of turning the service on, I think we sold a few books, like less than 10 in the first day. By the time, we even had an offer around selling the business, we were doing at peak periods, something like 1 million books a day, maybe even more like millions a day at peak times around like Christmas morning, like 1 million an hour. So pretty crazy. And we went from like 0 countries to every country, like over 190, from one language to north of 90 languages. And so, I mean, we had a good clock speed. The business was humming, and we realized something really important, which was, and this is something that Amazon, I think, knew from the start. It took us a while to learn it, that the device, the e-readers, which we became very good at building, and like I mentioned, we won all these awards. We generally beat them in most awards or reviews by the end of the second year, let's say. Pretty incredible for a company that never built a device before, or people that never built a device before. But that device was the driver of content acquisition, of content purchasing. So in short, people that download the app, they also had other apps. They were promiscuous. They might buy from you, they might not. There was no subscription model in those days. So you had to reacquire them all the time. So those users were actually quite expensive and not that productive. And they were not what drove revenues. And I remember this point about devices. And obviously, smartphones were already in the market. iPads became common, or tablets came into the market. My board said, why are we investing so much in these devices? And we would say, because they are the single best driver of content sales and retention and, customer acquisition. You get loyal customers that buy from you not once a year, but several times a month. And there's just no replacing that kind of customer. And they said, but what if we got the best OEM deal, where we could be embedded on the home screen of one of the big guys, one of the big smartphone manufacturers. And I said, okay, well, we're not going to get Apple because by then they had already launched iBooks, and they just had a policy, which has been challenged in the courts of late, that, if you were in their business, even though they started their business later, they weren't going to play nice. I said, which one would you like me to get? And they said, well, I don't know, maybe Samsung, Motorola, it went down a list. We went and got all of them, every single one, including, and most importantly, Samsung, and we're embedded in that home screen. And Samsung and all of these other smartphones where we got these embed deals or OEM deals never amounted to more than 5% of sales. So the device was critical. The e-reader was critical. However, as we started to get scale, as we started to distribute in Walmarts and Best Buys and Tesco's and Targets and other large chains around the world, we couldn't play this game of, hey, you're my partner, and so I need 50% of the cash for this order upon order, another 25 before 6 weeks before. Couldn't play that game at all. I would get the order, and then I would deliver the product, and at some point later, for Walmart, it could be 120 days, I would get paid. And even then, they wouldn't pay 100%. It was always painful. So the device was critical. The working capital demands were enormous, right? We went from 0 to 100 million of sales in the first year of devices, and that doubled the next year, and it doubled again the next year. So you can see where I'm going. The working capital needs were massive. There's no venture capital money that in those days that would do that deal. Most banks would not do that deal because from their standpoint, they're like, Amazon could drop a new device in between one of your gigantic orders, or drop the price of an existing device, and then you'd be screwed. So no thanks. So we had this moment in August of 2011, and that moment was we just raised a Series C, super fast, $50 million, which in those days was a big number. And forecasts were coming in for the number of readers I needed for the holiday season. And they were more than double what I told investors, more than double the working capital that we had, I didn't really know how I was going to fund it. We went to talk to some banks, was a no-go. No one was willing to give us, a big line or term debt or anything like that. And we thought maybe we could go public. And we explored that, but we're like, that's not enough time. We can't go public in the next 6 weeks. So literally right around that time, we had this random call from eBay. I believe it's John Donahoe was the CEO at the time. I think just stepped down from Nike. And within days, we heard from the head CEO of Buy.com. Buy.com, I knew of them, but honestly, I'd kind of forgotten about them. They were owned by Rakuten, large Japanese internet e-commerce player. And then within days, we also had talked to Russ Grandinetti, who's running the Kindle program for Amazon.
You're in play.
We were in play, and it happened very fast. Like literally, private jets showed up in Toronto, and like small armies of people, and it looked like, this was a real option. And we did not want to sell. We did not think, it was the right time to sell. But this working capital problem and how we were going to fund the business, we even went to some of the giant pension funds in the country and some of the other venture funds we knew, strategics. There was no path. And whether or not we got through that holiday season, and I had a belief that you're not going forward, you're going backwards. So that was a mental block to begin with. But let's say we could get through that holiday season, buy some time, maybe not sell as many devices, and then figure out the funding for the year ahead. Honestly, I just felt like we would fall too far behind, and so the option of selling started to look very real, and we literally made the decision to sell while in a hotel room at the Georges V, the Four Seasons in Paris, with my lead investor and chairman. And it was a hard decision, no question about it. I never got into any of these companies to sell them and monetize, believe it or not. My engineering mindset, nerd Olympics winner ethos was to build something great and solve big problems. And eventually I really fell in love with building teams and culture. And we were so on a high at that moment that selling was the last thing on my mind, but it seemed like it was the only way to enable the company to keep staying in the game and still grow.
I haven't followed it since. Is it still around?
Yeah. So one of my exec team members is the CEO, has been the CEO for, I think, the last 7 or 8 years. Michael Tamlin is amazing CEO and leader there, doing great. The new devices are, selling almost as much as ever. The content, more of it, different kinds. They have a subscription model. They sell around the world. And they're part of a bigger family. I mean, part of my thesis at the time, and I always ask this question in those moments, like, what's the future model here look like? Does this thing really stand alone, or does it belong somewhere else? Like, does it belong in an app store? Which was the model that I eventually kind of bought into and believed. The other alternative would be that it belongs inside, a publisher, a giant publisher, which felt like the wrong thing. That felt like it was a no win scenario, or, kill the company scenario. So it's either like you're shooting for the stars to be the Netflix of the category, but unfortunately you just needed a ton of capital, at least for the next little while. And that capital was impossible to get, or you were going to become a part of an app store. Selling to Amazon would have been really eventually giving up the brand and becoming a part of their Kindle brand and the international, we would boost them internationally because we were number 1 or number 2 in every market we were in. We ended up buying the Sony business. They were actually first. Sony was first. We bought that Sony business for $1. Kobo did. So, in the end, we made the call And it was not an easy decision. And it was based on the premise that books was not TV or movies. It was a much smaller category. It would get tucked in to a bigger app store. eBay didn't make any sense. Amazon felt like giving up, and honestly, it felt like screwing all of my core partners around the world with someone who's their enemy. Rakuten felt global, and Mickey is a real entrepreneur. The founder of Rakuten was still running it. It's founder and CEO, and it just seemed like the right fit.
That's amazing. I love it. So, first of all, I appreciate you taking me through all this history. Let's talk about what you've been doing for the last 10 years. Let's spend some time there, right? So League, you're 10 years in, you got 20 million users. Maybe just take 1 second and tell folks what League is.
Yeah. So the thesis at the start was very simple. Healthcare is arguably one of the most important, if not the most important industry. We all need it. Unfortunately, most of us can't get enough of it or can't get it when we need it. And it's generally a one size fits all. My bet was that healthcare would catch up in terms of its digital transformation. It would go through a digital transformation. That would come with a business transformation where it would be more about the end consumer, and data, my healthcare data, your healthcare data, would increasingly be vital in delivering a personalized healthcare experience for everybody. So our mission was, it's about the consumer. We want to empower the consumer every day with their health. And we're going to build a technology platform that is going to create this magical experience that everyone's going to want to use for their healthcare, to get their meds, book appointments with doctors, see their results, pay with their insurance or with their credit card, follow a healthcare program, maybe a chronic condition management program, and on and on and on and on. Any job that you can do for your health, we wanted to make available in our platform. We started with an idea, which is, I'm going to put all this platform stuff together into an app and to sell that app as a software as a service model to employers for their employees. And the value prop to them was, we're going to bring all of your benefits and health into one place to go, one app called the League app, where you can go to access, navigate, and pay. And so we did that. And to be honest, like commercially, we were slower to get going with this company, with League, than we were with Kobo. At the end of year 2, we started to get some real traction, and we thought, okay, this employer thing is it. Let's sell to small to medium-sized businesses. We did that throughout year 3. We doubled, or actually more than doubled. The old mantra of triple, triple, double, double, double.
Yeah. The Jason Lincoln best in class SaaS special.
Yeah. So we were beating the triple, triple. We did the first triple from $1 million in ARR in 6 months, and did the next triple in about 8 months, and then kind of doubled from there. And we did so by moving up market. So we sold to ever larger businesses, and we became the place that all of their employees would go all the time to access, navigate, and pay for healthcare. And their insurance was kind of embedded. Like we acted almost as an overlay on the various insurance companies or benefits offerings they had. And but that's really not what the company is today. That drove an exponential triple, double curve. And then something happened. It was an out of left field conversation. And it was a question, really. Could we build on your platform? So there's not only just the League app, but there's other apps. And it was from a large Canadian healthcare leader, retailer, Shoppers Drug Mart. It's part of Loblaw. They wanted to create a digital front door to healthcare, and they wanted to shift their business model, which has pharmacy and beauty and grocery, to offer more care. And being that there is a shortage of primary care, it's hard to get care. they could be the front door to healthcare for Canadians. And so all of a sudden we had a deal that was almost bigger than the entire company after the triple, double, double, double. And, my board thought, well, this looks like it could be a distraction. And we had
Revenue
that-
concentration risk, new line of business. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had that debate, and we were unanimous that it's something we should try. And all of a sudden the pandemic happened, and the deal still went forward, which was, uncertain at best. We delivered, and all of a sudden we went from, winning hundreds or single digit thousands of people at a time by winning their employer to winning tens and hundreds of thousands and millions at a time. And it was a real, real scale shift, massive step function that happened over the course of 6 months.
I guess your platform was well built.
Very good point. It was. We could handle the scale from a performance standpoint. And all of a sudden we had multiple apps running on League, and we thought, I wonder if we could do this again. Was this a one-off, or could we do it again? So without going through all the details, I'll just share, we have done that over and over and over again. And so essentially what we are today is a platform that helps you build any kind of healthcare experience that is going to give you the highest engagement with your end consumer, your end user. And that engagement, high engagement with a healthcare experience, can turn into real dollar cost savings, so better economics, but more importantly, better outcomes for the individual. And so we work with the largest insurance companies in the world, the largest healthcare systems and healthcare providers in the world. We just won our first international, big system deal in Australia. It's not even counted in our 25 million number, because they would have about 10 million Australians on that. We just won our first government deal, which we haven't announced yet. Another 5 million people in a state. So we are a large scale provider of healthcare software to create the best customer experiences in healthcare.
That's amazing. So much more than I thought it was, which is really cool. I initially thought, especially going into the pandemic, oh man, Mike's selling to HR. They're going to have their budgets cut. This is going to be a shit show. So I love that there's more to it. I'm curious, are you able to prove efficacy, like close the loop and show that engagement leads to these outcomes, and therefore leads, basically the thing sells itself because the ROI is there?
Yeah, so it's a great question. When I think of ROI, I think of layers of ROI. The first layer is really, around cost and speed. So most of our customers have IT departments. Most of them have existing websites and applications, and most of them are not very good, to be quite candid, or at least across the measure of engagement or NPS. They're not really used. And we offer a way to move, cheaper, faster, better. Launch in a matter of a few months versus a few years. I'll launch with a SaaS or a platform as service model that scales with users and starts lower versus spending, 10, 30, 100 million of capital with your favorite consulting shop and your IT team. And we've proven time and time again that we can 10x the engagement, at least, that you already have. So it starts with a straight ARB on labor or TCO story. Why would you do this to reinvent the wheel yourself? You just build on us. And that alone provides a ton of value. And we see it, our customers end up shutting down, 10, 15, $20 million worth of legacy systems that nobody uses anymore, and end up saving dollars right away. And then they get this crazy engagement curve, which allows them to Also, self-serve customers, so call center costs can go down. But where you are going is what I think of as the third layer, and that's around efficacy. And that takes time from a launch, right? It doesn't happen in 1 year. You see it though over 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the conditions you are looking for. I had a customer of mine come to my board meeting actually at the beginning of last week, and he shared, this is a large insurer, he shared how he has a dashboard that shows him what his population looks like now, thanks to League, in terms of health data and health risks, stratified, quantified, and how those risks are changing. And with that data, he and his team can make investments on where he wants to move the needle and get an ROI. But there's a whole other dimension, which I honestly, even to this day, I'm surprised I didn't totally understand it. They make capital reserve decisions at the end of every period, every month. Like, okay, we've got these many potential people that are on claim and might be on claim for diabetes, 80 million. We have this many people that, have children, and those children that may have early childhood development issues, autism, et cetera, 30 million. Well, those decisions can now be made with real-time data, and you can make incredibly efficient capital reserve and capital optimization decisions based on that. So more of this will show up in time. I can tell you across various disease states that our users on a League-powered platform, follow programs, and those programs yield results, lower incidence, higher adherence, greater preventative measures taken. Like a very simple example I use all the time is it costs like $1,000 to $2,000 to get a colonoscopy. Colon cancer costs, $500,000 to $1 million. And as a unhappy recipient of this letter that showed up in my house last year when I turned 50, that I need to
you had to
get
do
my
the poop
colon.
test.
Yeah,
I've been there.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we and most of my friends toss that thing in the garbage. We show that we can get more people to respond to preventative measures. So a ton of ROI, but these are big populations, big platforms, and across disease states. Some disease states, it just takes longer to see the ROI. Some we already see it, and it's powerful.
I love it. Well, what you're doing is super important, right? We have it. You're international, obviously, but if I just think of North America, and particularly the US, right? Aging population, the standard American diet doesn't work, right? Like, which is the rate of chronic disease, the healthcare costs. I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah, this is a problem globally, and some countries have it much worse, believe it or not. But certainly the US and Canada are both in models, even though we have different systems, models that are unsustainable. And unfortunately, we will see, I live in Toronto, and we'll see this in Canada, that services will be cut. It's the only way, because no Canadian that I know is going to be happy with a 60% or 65%, total tax on income. We're already seeing, capital gains tax go up to make up revenue shortfalls. That is not a sustainable direction either. So you got to solve the system from a first principles problem. Technology can give leverage, prevention, and some of the other, things that we enable, self-service. They do lower costs. They do provide more care in the palm of people's hands. They don't need doctors for everything. They can go to pharmacists and go to technology, through a League-powered app. So I see this as a massive, massive opportunity. We've just really begun 10 years in with about 25 million people. In the next 10 years, we want to get to about 200 and 50 million people. And, we're well on our way.
As we wrap up, I know we're into overtime. I want to hit you with just a couple of rapid fire things. I spent lunch today reading your reflections from the first 5 years because you haven't posted all 10. And there were just a few things that stood out for me. One is, you talked about this culture of winning that you saw with Microsoft, the ethos with the Navy SEALs of all in all the time. That you have this motto of kind of life after all is about living, and living your best life is a core value. Are these concepts at odds for you? Like, I don't see you often. I think the last time I saw you was 2019, but every time I see you, you have a smile on your face. You strike me as a happy person. You've been through all of these challenges. You haven't burnt out. So I feel like you're having some fun along the way. So are you able to kind of thread the needle and have that Navy SEAL intensity, but still have a great life? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's a choice, is the way I would answer that. And I choose to live my best life. It's a core value at League. There's a core value back when I first worked with Elon and Kimball. And it's probably an area where we disagreed a little bit. I valued family and I valued team, perhaps in a different way than they did at the time. And for me, that's only grown even more important and richer. And, I'm very protective of weekends. It's not that I don't work on weekends. I mean, it's hard to it is hard when you're the founder, co-founder, CEO, to ever shut it off. I do think about it a lot, but I enjoy it. And I do exercise and find new challenges like half marathons and triathlons and stuff like that to go after. It provides release and distraction. It's as Joe Rogan, I think, once said, it's hard to be very stressed or feel anxiety if there's 100-pound weight, balancing over your head. I do prioritize living my best life. And yes, absolutely, it is at odds with all in all the time. And I just try to thread the needle. And I think a lot of founders, hear about things like balance, maybe from the angel on their shoulder is like, yeah, you should have balance. And on the other side, it's like, you've got to be working 22-hour days and going for it. I don't know that balance is a real thing. I just try to slot all the good things that I really want. And sometimes those are more about the company than not. And sometimes they're more about my family than not. But priority management and constant prioritization is something that you've got to do well as a CEO. So I try to do it, and I try to thread the needle. I'm not always great at it. And honestly, I will say this to anyone that's listening. It's been a hard 5 years to be a founder or CEO of anything. So threading the needle through a once in 100-year pandemic, the absolute swing and inflation and, liquidity in the market and fun, it's been very hard. So threading the needle in the last 5 years has felt harder than maybe at any other point in my lifetime. But I choose to have the smile on my face, and I choose to hold those values, even though they conflict. I think that's okay.
I love it. Maybe last one for you, Mike. I talk with my CEOs all the time about how as your company gets bigger, your role really becomes a communications role. Right? So you're just getting people aligned and going in the right direction. And I would love it if you could tell folks about the week ahead memo that you wrote every week and the role that played in, fulfilling your communications responsibilities as CEO.
Yeah. So chief storyteller is absolutely part of the gig, and it never stops. So you find different avenues, different channels, different mediums to tell your story. And one that I have found and has been very useful for me, I did a version of it at Kobo, different and certainly more pronounced here at League. And it starts on Sunday night, and I start to think about what's important, what to share from a sort of achievement celebration, screw up, relevant news story, market story, context from my week prior, and use that to try to focus the team on what matters in the week ahead. And I write it on Sunday night. Sometimes I finish it Monday morning. I aim for 52 weeks a year. I probably have averaged about 48, and I've done that for 10 years. It's rare that I give up the pen, so to speak. I did to my co-founder, Dan, this past week, and I had actually some great material that I wanted to use. But I decided I had to hold it. But I do that as a way to reach all my people all the time. I don't expect that everyone's going to read it every week. I don't. But we also do town halls at Thursday at 4:00, like clockwork since the beginning. And there's other every week. And so there are a number of vehicles where, I hope to catch some people multiple times in a week. I hope to catch some people at least once, everyone at least once. And the TWA, which I now have a collection of nearly 500 of, have served not only as a great way to communicate, but also a great way to reflect. Because at the end of every year, we have a year in review town hall, which has turned into like a lot of fun, to be totally honest. But I just go back to the TWAs, and I always include this section of the year in review town hall where I start with the time machine, which in my pop culture brain is a DeLorean. And so we go through a trip in the time machine, and I use the TWAs as a key way to kind of, reflect on what's important in that story to cap off the year. And frankly, I've used it for the 10 stories of 10 years to reflect on the last decade. And it's been a great journey. I'm not done yet. I just wrote year 6 a few days ago. I'm working on year 7. And, when I'm done, I'll do an epilogue for, the next decade. But my goal is to get it into a book by the end of this year and get it in the hands of every employee, investor, friend, anyone that cares to read it.
That's amazing. I truly love it. And, you brought up a really key word, right, in what you're doing there, which is giving context. You have all the context, and it's important for every individual contributor to have it so they can connect the dots between their work, the bigger pictures. So important.
Everybody, at the end of the day, it's work, and it's a place where you can come and do that work and get paid for it. But we all need meaning for what we're doing, and restating the vision and the mission and what we're about, and doing that regularly is a part of that. But these stories that show up in TWA and town hall and year in review and these reflections, these are the threads that weave together to form the meaning that matters for people. So it's important to me. I think it's important to a lot of people here, and regardless, I'm gonna keep doing it because I like it, and I think it works.
Well, Mike, this has been a real pleasure. So many great stories here. I've really enjoyed hearing them. I wish we were sitting by a fire drinking a single malt and you could just keep sharing stories, but maybe another time.
Another time. Single malt sounds wonderful. I appreciate you inviting me, and look forward to chatting again, maybe with that single malt.
Sounds good. All right. Be well. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Startup CEO Show. We'll see you next time.